In this video, a ridiculous neighbor stole my vacant property while I was out of the country and then turned my piece of land into a parking lot. Here is what happened. Welcome back to Ripe Stories. This one is from r/legal advice. So I inherited a decent-sized vacant lot from my grandfather about 2 years ago. It is in a pretty busy part of the city, fully paved and fenced off. The property is worth quite a bit given its location, but I've been waiting for the right time to develop it. And then last year I got an amazing opportunity to work abroad for 12 months. Before leaving, I made sure everything was properly secured. Sturdy fence, heavy-duty padlock, and even installed a couple of security cameras. Though I later found out that they'd been disabled, but more on that later. I also asked my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, to keep an eye on the place. She is this wonderful 72-year-old lady who lives across the street and spends most of her time people watching from her front window. She agreed to let me know if anything seemed off. Everything was fine for the first few months, and then about 4 months ago, Mrs. Rodriguez started sending me concerning messages. Well, apparently, some woman named Karen, yes, literally Karen, had shown up with bolt cutters one morning and just cut the lock off my fence. According to Mrs. Rodriguez, this Karen lives a few blocks away and has quite the reputation in the neighborhood for causing trouble. What happened next still makes my blood boil. So this woman had the audacity to put up signs reading "Parking $20 per day" and started operating my property as her personal parking lot business. She even hired some teenager to help collect money and direct cars. Mrs. Rodriguez sent me photos of Karen pocketing cash from drivers and installing more professional-looking signs that advertised monthly passes available. I immediately contacted the police, but since I was not physically present and Karen was claiming she had verbal permission to operate the lot, which was a complete lie, they said it was a civil matter. Meanwhile though, Karen was making hundreds of dollars a day using my property. The real kicker? When I finally managed to get a hold of Karen's phone number and called her, she had the nerve to tell me that she was doing me a favor by maintaining my abandoned property and providing a service to the community. She even suggested we could partner up and split the profits 20-80, with her getting 80% of course. Well guys, thank God for Mrs. Rodriguez, this amazing woman documented everything. She took photos and videos of Karen's operation, kept detailed logs of how many cars parked there each day, recorded license plate numbers, and even chatted with some of the regular parkers to inform them that the lot was not legally operated. By the way, causing several to stop using it immediately. I then flew back home last week, but I wanna handle this the right way. I've already spoken with a property lawyer, but I would appreciate additional perspectives. Here is what I wanna know. What kind of damages can I sue for? Just the parking fees she collected, or can I go after more? Number 2, should I file a criminal complaint for trespassing and vandalism, aka cutting my lock? And how do I handle the people who purchased monthly passes from her? Some are claiming that they should be allowed to keep parking there since they paid in advance. Also, any other legal angles I should consider? I got tons of evidence because Mrs. Rodriguez's photos, videos, logs, etc., security camera footage from neighboring businesses showing Karen's operations, and even some Venmo transactions we found where people paid Karen for parking passes. Thanks in advance for any advice. I'm still in shock that someone could be this brazenly entitled. And now I collected some comments from the Reddit thread for you guys that we will read. Comment number 1, holy cow, you got a slam dunk case here. I'm a property lawyer in Texas, not your lawyer, this is not legal advice, and these kind of cases usually don't have nearly this much evidence. A few key points for you though: you can sue for all revenue she collected, which you can probably estimate pretty accurately thanks to your neighbor's documentation, and you can also sue for trespassing, property damage, and possibly conversion, basically treating your property as her own. In addition, file a police report for under vandalism, cutting the lock if you haven't already, and those monthly passes are not worth the paper they are printed on. You should post clear "no parking, violators will be towed" signs and start having cars towed immediately. You should get a good local property lawyer and go after her hard. With your evidence, this should be pretty straightforward. And another comment said, speaking from 15 years of commercial property management experience, immediately put up no parking signs and get a towing company on contract. Like today. Those monthly pass holders have no legal right to park there, but you need proper signage before you can tow them. Also, calculate your damages based on comparable paid parking lots in the area. If other lots charge $25 a day, that's what you should claim as damages, not the $20 she was charging. Comment number 3, you might want to look into whether she has any assets before spending too much on legal fees. People who pull stunts like this often don't have much to collect from. Definitely sue her, but be strategic about it. Comment number 4, please tell me you're gonna press charges. I'm so sick of entitled Karens thinking they can just take whatever they want. Another comment said, this is a textbook case of conversion. You need to document everything, it sounds like you already have, then send her a cease and desist letter via certified mail, file police reports for vandalism and trespassing, and sue her in civil court. The monthly pass holders are not your problem, their beef is with Karen, not you. Post proper signs and start towing. And now we got an update to the story that reads like this. Wow, this blew up overnight. Thank you for all the advice. I've scheduled consultations with 3 different property lawyers for next week. I'll post an update once things start moving forward. And yes, I already ordered the no parking signs. They'll be up tomorrow morning. And now another update. Thanks for all the great advice on my original post. A lot has happened and I want to give you all an update on the parking lot Karen situation. Well, buckle up because it got way crazier before it got better. Following your advice, I immediately put up proper no parking, violators will be towed signs, contracted with a local towing company. I also hired a property lawyer and went with Mrs. XYZ who specializes in property disputes. I filed a police report about the vandalism, and the day after I put up the no parking signs, Karen showed up screaming at me about stealing her business. I recorded the whole interaction on my phone. Karen, you cannot do this. I have contracts with these people. I will sue you. Me, this is my private property. You never had any right to operate a business here. Karen, I improved this property. It was just sitting here empty before I made it useful. I demand compensation for my work. Me, your work was trespassing and theft. Please leave my property immediately. Karen, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Spoiler alert, she did not have a lawyer, and the next day she actually tried to cut the lock again. Fortunately though, I had installed new security cameras and Mrs. Rodriguez called the police immediately for me. They caught her in the act this time and she was arrested for attempted vandalism and trespassing. She spent a night in jail before being released on bail, but it gets even better. Remember those monthly pass holders? Well, it turns out Karen had collected over $15,000 in advance payments for 6-month parking passes just 2 weeks before I returned. When they realized they had been scammed, several of them filed police reports against her for fraud as well. My lawyer sent her a demand letter for all parking revenue she collected, estimated at $45,000 based on Mrs. Rodriguez's detail logs, also property damage, legal fees, and additional damages for conversion of property. Karen's response? She filed for bankruptcy thinking it would protect her. But here is where it gets good. Because her actions were willful and fraudulent, the bankruptcy court wouldn't discharge her debt to me or the monthly pass holders. We are now in the middle of legal proceedings, but my lawyer says it's looking very good. The judge seems particularly irritated by Karen's behavior, especially after seeing Mrs. Rodriguez's meticulous documentation. We found out Karen owns her house free and clear, inherited from her parents, so they are actually assets that we can go after. However, new problems have emerged. Karen's adult children have started harassing Mrs. Rodriguez, driving by her house at night, honking their horns and leaving nasty notes in her mailbox. We have filed for a restraining order, but I'm worried about escalation. I would appreciate advice on how to protect Mrs. Rodriguez from harassment. Number 2, whether I should press additional criminal charges, and if I should consider a separate civil suit for the harassment. Thanks again for all the help. Someone in the comments said, report this to the DA's office handling the criminal charges against Karen. They may add additional charges too. And another comment said, get Mrs. Rodriguez some security cameras ASAP. Document every instance of harassment. This kind of retaliation often escalates. Comment number 4, the bankruptcy attempt is actually great for your case. It shows that she knew she was liable and tried to escape responsibility. Keep pushing forward with the civil case and definitely pursue the witness intimidation angle. Comment number 5, tell Mrs. Rodriguez to get a gun. These people sound dangerous. Comment number 6, the house being unencumbered by a mortgage is fantastic news for your civil case. That's a significant asset that can be used to satisfy a judgment. Keep pursuing this aggressively. And now we got a final update to the story. First, I want to thank this community for all the fantastic advice. Everything has finally been resolved and I thought you would all like to hear how it ended. The civil case against Karen was settled last week and the judge's ruling was even better than we expected. Here is what went down. The court proceedings. My lawyer presented all the evidence, including Mrs. Rodriguez's detailed logs. The judge specifically praised her extraordinary record-keeping, security camera footage from neighboring businesses, photos and videos of Karen's operation, testimonies from several monthly pass holders, and police reports about the log-cutting incidents. Karen represented herself, big mistake, and her defense was interesting. So she claimed she was providing a necessary community service and that since the lot was abandoned, she had a right to improve it. The judge was not impressed, especially when she admitted to cutting the log and claimed it was okay because supposedly the property was not being used anyway. Now for the judgment, Karen has to pay me $68,500, which is $45,000 for collected parking fees, $15,000 in punitive damages, and $8,500 for legal fees and property damage. Furthermore, she has to pay restitution to all the monthly pass holders she scammed. And number 3, the judge issued a permanent injunction barring her from coming within 500 feet of my property. The harassment situation? Remember how Karen's kids were harassing Mrs. Rodriguez? Well, that backfired spectacularly too. After we installed security cameras at Mrs. R's house, we caught them in the act multiple times. They then added witness intimidation charges and both kids ended up accepting plea deals that included community service and no contact orders protecting Mrs. Rodriguez. As for Karen's comeuppance, since Karen couldn't pay the judgment immediately, the court put a lien on her house. She tried to quickly sell it to her sister for $1, obviously trying to hide assets, but the judge shut that down fast. She was now being forced to sell the house at market value to pay the judgment against her. As for Mrs. Rodriguez, remember that gift I promised her before I left? Well, I used part of the judgment money to buy her a top-of-the-line security system and a new iPad for her future surveillance activities. She has become a neighborhood hero and other residents regularly bring her home-cooked meals and stop by for coffee. The property? Well, I've decided to develop the lot into a mixed-use building with, wait for it, paid parking on the ground level. Several of Karen's former customers have already signed up for legitimate monthly passes, so lessons learned, good neighbors are worth their weight in gold, document everything, don't cheap out on security cameras, and listen to r/legal advice except for the get a gun people. Thanks again for all your help. For those asking, yes, Karen did try to appeal the judgment. The appeals court rejected it in record time, literally the same day. Also, Mrs. Rodriguez says hi to everyone who's been asking about her. She is thoroughly enjoying her new iPad and has started taking digital photography classes at the senior center. And the next one is a fantastic petty revenge story. So I was married to a very manly man for 17 years. I ended up doing all the admin tasks and mental load tasks. He had a money-earning job and I did everything else, even schedule this man's dental appointments and buy his parents' birthday cards. At first it was fine, but eventually not so much, and he refused to change, so things came to a head and ended. I'm sure after I left he was unpleasantly surprised to discover how much work his assistant actually did. Anyway, it's been 5 years, we have our own lives and I don't think much about him and we certainly don't talk. But one day I start getting calls from him. He explains to me that he never removed me from his home and auto insurance and says, "They won't remove you unless you call." He is pissy and keeps calling me and saying I have to do this right away and being very rude. It's been 5 years and now it's an emergency? Anyway, he ends up calling me every day for a week and saying I've created a problem for him. I called the company and the woman on the phone says, "No, we totally would have removed you, he never asked." I can see there's no record of him calling ever. Oh really? She then says, "You know, moving him from married to a single man, this is gonna raise his rate considerably. Is he sure this is important to him?" I laughed. "Oh yes, very important." In fact, I have not lived there for 5 years, so his current policy should really be backdated. She laughs and says, "Yes, he's now going to get a large bill. Not my problem anymore." Edit, okay, since apparently this matters to people, I'm assuming the agent meant for the current contract and policy, which means just this year. I honestly didn't ask because I don't really care, and that was not why I called them. And yes, he is under 40, so I think maybe that affects it, but again, I didn't ask. I don't spend a lot of brain power on this guy anymore. I do think people are probably right about him having a new girl that was upset. Update, you're always so right. It never occurred to me that he'd be suddenly concerned my name was on a progressive car and home insurance bill because of a new girl, but that was absolutely why. I have full legal and physical custody of the kids and he doesn't have anything to do with them, which is his choice, but our son recently had a minor surgery and of course insurance has been giving us the runaround even after pre-approving the procedure. Thanks United, great job. He's the primary insurance holder due to his job, so I can only do so much. So I had to call him and ask him to call them even though I already did all the paperwork. By the way, being a grown-up is so awesome. Normally he told me to just use his signature and info because he cannot be bothered, but I cannot do a man's voice. And yes, everyone who thought I probably know his social and stuff, I absolutely do, plus his parents' birthdays, etc. He doesn't even remember his own kids' birthdays. When we were on the phone, he suddenly started ranting about how expensive everything is, how he is so broke, and because he bought a brand new car and then suddenly had a pipe burst and it cost him a fortune to fix the kitchen wall and floor and part of the garage. So that tells me he needed to access the insurance, but then he starts telling me how awesome his new girl is because she stepped up and put money into the house. The house he now tells me she lives in rent-free. I don't know, pitching in that case seems like at least someone could do, but okay, not my business. I just don't really know why he thinks I'll be a sympathetic ear to the situation. I was like, yeah, okay, well, text me when you've called United so I can call the hospital back and bye. I don't have a lot of sympathy because this man makes over 120k per year and pays 20k of that in child support for 3 kids he has not seen in a year. And he's too busy going on vacations to even call or text them. Also, I don't really give a damn if his pipes burst. I hope new younger model woman gave him an earful for still having my name on everything, and I hope Progressive sends him a huge bill on that brand new car. Ha, this situation really brought out the pissy in me. And to end the video in a nice way, we will read a new petty revenge story that you don't want to miss. It is titled, "My former employer treated everyone like garbage, so myself and former employees cost them a prestigious award." And by the way guys, this story is so delicious that honestly it could be on Pro Revenge as well. Either way, I worked for about 5 years for a company where by the end I was practically suicidal from the stress and the mistreatment. When I left, I was operating as a supervisor without the pay for a shift I was not even on. To give you an idea of just how awful this company was, I gained nearly a $10 pay increase by leaving and I now had a fraction of the responsibility. Basically, everything was fine until the pandemic attacked, and considering the industry I was now in, it was a given that I would receive a pink slip. The following year that transpired was the most hectic, stressful and difficult periods of my life. To try and spare you any unnecessary details, what transpired was me having to fire one contract agency for grossly padding my resume, only for this new contract agency to end up bait and switching me. Promising me administrative experience, the degree I was working on at the time, only to turn me around and send me back to my former employer that I had so desperately wanted to leave in the past. Why, are you asking? Well, they had become their biggest client because they were a respiratory medical device company and business was obviously booming. Desperate for an income, I agreed and kept sending out resumes in the meantime. I was only back for 4 weeks, but holy hell, the place was like a war zone run by the most masochistic idiots you ever met. Some of the crap the company was pulling, trying to squeeze every last ounce of productivity, was appalling. They decided to try an old stick and carrot ploy whereby if you work 20+ hours of overtime each week between Thanksgiving and New Year's, you could get a $2,000 cash bonus. It probably goes without saying that you had people so desperate for spare cash that people were literally risking their lives to go to work. We had no less than 2 winter storms that shut down the state in the 4 weeks I was there, but the company found every loophole to exploit to keep from paying out these bonuses. They also lacked any semblance of compassion. I was on my way to work when my car launched its throwout bearing, leaving me stranded. I called both the temporary agency and my employer, who immediately told me that if I did not show, it was my job. I was 2 hours late and they complained to my temp agency anyways because I refused to make up the lost time by staying and assisting the overnight crew. I left when I finally got hired by another medical device company full-time, meaning I could give the temp agency and my former employer the middle finger. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I had made friends during my time there, much like POWs commiserating over trauma, and many were still working for the old company, and it was through them that I and so many more jilted comrades learned of the contest. You see, the state this all took place in is small, not the smallest, but close to it, so there is an independent business magazine for the state that holds a competition for best company to work for in this state. My former employer had actually won the award about a year before I exited the stage, left the first time around. It had been the requisite waiting time, and said company could now reapply to try and reclaim their glory. All the naked little emperors running this company were so high in their ivory towers, falsely believing everything was coming up roses. So how this competition works is, the company is interviewed by the magazine and a link to an online survey is sent out to be disseminated to the respective employees. Thus, when me and so many who had a Discord group at the time learned of it through someone still within the employ of these guys, they were more than willing to become a mole, and when the surveys were sent out, the former employees received one as well. It goes without saying, but we trashed this place in the survey. At the end you could leave a comment, and so I regaled them with the abuse I faced, my initial employment with the company, and how when I was forced back, I left when my former boss insulted me in an email for having the audacity to leave in the first place, all the while using my newly deceased mother to prop up her own sob story. You may think it ends there, but it doesn't. That is not where the revenge comes in. Oh no, imagine the shock when a message comes through the Discord group. Holy crap guys, if you open the survey in an incognito browser, you can take it as many times as you want. Me and my crew had gone from slingshots to being gifted a cannon, and we were not gonna waste the opportunity. We proceeded to send in negative surveys as often as we could, and our mole would forward us the HR updates, and when 90% participation was reached, we halted our attack and waited. A week before the results would be announced, our mole informed us that bubbly was being stockpiled in the break room fridges. I had the forethought to monitor their LinkedIn and Facebook page, and every other post was about the BCTWF award and how excited they were to achieve it, assuring victory was in the bag. Then the announcement came and our mole excitedly texted us that management was silent. The bubbly magically disappeared from the fridges, and any social media post referring to the contest or magazine vanished, and no one was allowed to talk about it. They had obviously not expected such a pitiful defeat, but the results from the survey was so troubling, they came back to my former employer to go over the results. The company never really recovered from that point onwards and struggled to remain upright. Most recently they had to delist from the stock exchange and go back to suckling the teat of venture capitalists. And yeah guys, if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like the video, and I will see you again tomorrow.